Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. You ever seen those LinkedIn posts out there or people on Twitter saying, as a JavaScript developer, as a software engineer, 128% of your time is spent debugging, or most of your time is spent debugging. And that's not true, but it's also not false. If you write code, you're going to necessarily write bugs. And I get this question from a lot of more junior developers that think, hey, if I get hired at a company and then I build a thing that they want me to build, then why do they keep me on? Like, what do I do after that, right? Like, what is the point of me just staying here and continuing to write code? Like, once I'm done, that's it, right? I wish it was that way, my friend. But the truth is, you're going to make a lot of bugs, and that's expected. I've never seen a person get, fired over making, a bug, unless it was super critical or something like that. If you make a terrible bug that no one caught that like lost all the money for the company, yeah, of course, that could be a firing type incident right there, couldn't it? But in general, it's expected that the more code you produce, the more features for a website you produce, the more bugs are going to necessarily come with that, right? So every time, like for example, your phone gets an update, they also have patches. Every month or something, you get a little notification on your phone saying, hey, tonight we're going to update these vulnerable security patches on your phone that the Chinese government and the Russian spies are using to hack into your phone. And you're like, oh yeah, no big deal. This happens every month. And you just kind of live with it, right? In fact, all the software we use, we just kind of gotten used to the idea that there's going to be updates, and some of them are going to be really critical. And if we don't get these critical updates, things could fall apart and ruin our lives, and our accounts could be drained and we'll be taken over and hacked by Russian spies. So we're used to this idea, right? The same thing goes for websites. If you create features on a website, they say, hey, we want a new button. We want a new page. We want this new integration with this third-party API. You're going to do it, and they're going to find out that, we didn't catch that one little edge case right there. There's going to be bugs. Learning how to fix bugs is going to be a superpower that is going to set you apart from the majority of developers out there that debug the complete wrong way. I was one of them. I'm going to walk you through the way I would debug using a method I called the REST method. And I'm going to tell you a little story about how I got hired and then promoted based on my ability to squash the toughest, biggest bugs out there. Let me take you back. Let me take you back to a time in the past. It was around midnight on a Thursday, years ago. Our platform team had finished doing a data migration, right? Took about 3 hours longer than we expected. I volunteered, trying to get a gold star on the team, and I thought, cool, I'll be the front-end developer counterpart on this call. I was part of a full-stack team, more front-end focused. Anyway, they said, hey, we need somebody on this call that knows a little bit about the front end in case something goes awry. And I thought, this is going to be a cakewalk. I'm going to get all the glory for doing nothing. So I thought, yeah, I'm just going to show up, kick back, eat some chips, watch TV at home. And then people say, hey, thank you, Brian, for being part of that. That's not the way it went at all. So as they're doing this migration, we saw no obvious errors at the time, except for one, our real-time line chart, this chart showing real-time data from all the polls and elections going on. Remember, this is like 2019, 2020, the year of the big elections and all the news that happened that year. Just a few things happened in 2020, BLM, the election, COVID-19, a ton of stuff. You can imagine just how crazy this real-time chart should be going during this time at the height of all these things happening. And we thought, oh no, that's not good. Other companies were using this to understand, what was going on in the world, trends. The military was using it. Government officials were using it. It was kind of important. The line chart was one of many apps that required the real-time data to be flowing, and it was flatlining. So we had two options at this point. We either roll back the entire migration and figure out the cause of the bug, or we figure out the cause of the bug that's currently there, and we decide what to do. It was about 12:30 a.m. now, and I decided to do what any good developer would do. I decided to rest. And not rest like take a snooze. No, that'd be crazy. Rest like my method for debugging. Reproduce the bug locally, examine the source code, set breakpoints, and test the fix. So reproducing the bug, the most important part of this whole operation. So this real-time data chart was using WebSockets, and it listened for mentions on Twitter, particularly, we use Reddit, Twitter, other news sources. It was past midnight, so I thought, well, maybe there's a possibility we're just not getting any hits, right? So I fired up my local version of it. I searched for Donald Trump, which I knew at the time would be getting some hits because it was like 2020. Still nothing. I opened up the network tab in the Chrome in developer tools. I inspected the incoming messages. I saw we were receiving messages, and I thought, okay, this is good. Even though I was secretly kind of hoping that the problem was on the back end side, I thought, well, this is obviously a bug. So the first thing is to be able to reproduce the issue, to be able to say, yes, I understand the issue. So I see the issue is that we, one, are receiving data, but two, we are not actually displaying it on the screen. Big problem. Time to look at the source code. So I'm not really familiar with this code at the time. I thought, okay, this is a massive code base. Haven't really looked at it all. So I'm looking at the real-time chart, and I saw, okay, this real-time chart is a React component. I can't really like dig on the documentation right now. I mean, this is like a thing. We got to open up shop essentially like 6 a.m. when people get to work at some parts of the country and they expect to see data, right? We can't just say, oh, sorry, our bad. So the production site has a minified version of the JavaScript code, which makes it really difficult to read. Minified means it's not human readable. It's been compacted in order to be faster and more performant in the browser. Not great for a human, great for a machine to read, not great for us. So what I did is I opened up locally the code and I needed to inspect it there. I also looked in the browser and I inspected the code in the Chrome developer tools. You can use Command and P, which will open up a file search tab where you can explore a certain file if you really wanted to get deep into it. I was not able to do that in this case because this was too minified for me to make heads or tails of. At least I could reproduce the bug on my machine at this point. I think, okay, cool. So let me look at the logic now for determining if the incoming message should be displayed or if there was some other issue at play, if there's anything glaring, right? And now you have a few options. So now I've reproduced the bug. I've inspected the local source code. Now I can either put 128 console logs in there, which a lot of people would do. They put console log, a log here, a log there, a log everywhere, log for you, log for you. That is a inefficient way to do it at best. So I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. It's like 1 a.m. at this point. And so I see, okay, here is the area where the code seems to be having issues. Message comes in, not getting extracted correctly. There's an object, there's an array of objects that contains the data. What's going on in here? I set breakpoints in the code. I use a debugger statement. I use debugger statements rather than console logs because they pause execution in the code. Pausing execution means I can stop right there. I can look at the surrounding code. I can hover over it and see what is the data at this particular point in time. The problem with the console log is you'll be having to run that same code many times. And I just didn't want to do that. I thought if I put the debugger in here, I can go line by line by line. If you're not familiar with using debuggers, look it up. They are super common, but oddly enough, underutilized. I don't get why more people don't use the debugger statement. It's so weird to me. Anyway, so now I'm setting the breakpoints, and I finally get to where I see the issue. So I'm running it locally. I see the debugger. Now the error was very obvious. We had some logic that was looking for something called profile underscore ID. And that had been changed to profile ID camel cased, lowercase p, capital I. Super small detail. It somehow got merged in at the exact wrong time. And I thought, oh, this is like trivial to fix. Now this is stupid easy to fix. Boom, I'm going to get it out. Bam. Next, I spent about an hour actually just doing this quote unquote small change because I had to now run through a ton of different scenarios to make sure that it actually worked as expected. Here's the other piece of this equation, of this puzzle, this method to solve bugs like a pro. You can't get overly excited and jump the gun because once you do that, you run the risk of introducing more bugs into the code in your effort to get something out. So you want to make sure that you're not breaking anything else because that would be even more embarrassing for you. If you say, I got to fix, and everybody's really happy, then you get it out, but it causes another bug. Well, now you've gone from being the hero to being the guy that everybody's like, well, can you really trust him anymore? You know, you kind of you've ruined your own credibility at that point. So I was like, well, I've done that mistake more than enough times. I've done all the mistakes. So that's why I'm talking about it to you here, because I love sharing these mistakes now. In hindsight, they're kind of fun to talk about. At the time, though, super stressful. So at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, cool, I got it. Great. I got the fix, and guess what? I still kind of rushed. It was like 3 or 4 in the morning at this point. So I never really questioned. I went through all the scenarios I could think of at like 2 in the morning. I didn't think about, oh, what about the other charts that aren't real time? I was testing all the real time charts. I didn't test some of our lesser and newer components, lesser used and newer components. Those didn't work so hot in the morning. Those were actually broken. Luckily, no one really cared. So they were so happy with the fact that I fixed this and got this done like at like 3 in the morning that they were like, man, hey, whatever, let's fix these later. What I would have done in retrospect is to test the fix. So I tested the fix locally through just running through the browser and mimicking the behavior that I saw. What would have been better is a unit test. So writing a simple unit test, by the way, if you're enrolled in Parsity, we actually have a unit testing course that comes as an addition to the program. So we have one within the program, another one that you get outside of it for testing front-end code, which I think is actually a little bit more difficult and is a bit of an art in itself, how to write tests for the front end and React components in specific. Anyway, enough plugging right there. I should have done that at the time. That would have saved me a little bit of embarrassment right there. Still, totally fine. Got it out, and people were overall happy. And when I hear people say, oh, there's no time to write a test, there's just no time. And then they end up, rerunning the same scenario 100 times, getting the code back because it wasn't working in the first place, rerunning it again. And I'm like, yeah, there's no time to write a test. We have time to run the same scenario 100 times, have it fail, go back, write more code, add more console logs and debugger statements. When there's no time to write a test, that's exactly when you should write a test. Anyway, a few months later, I got promoted at the same company. And I'll never forget, the CTO was on like the stage at the time at the company. We were in the office, not remote, like all you kids out there that want to do remote jobs and never see humans and stuff. We were 2 humans in the same building, and he was on a stage looking at other humans in the audience. And he said, I'm making the announcement. I'm promoting Brian Ginny today to senior software engineer. And he pointed at that exact incident. He said, there was an incident about a month ago or 2 months ago where there was a critical incident and he jumped into it. He didn't understand the code base and he still figured it out and got a fix out and saved us from an embarrassing error and got the app working. He said, so that was a really impressive feat. And I thought, oh, wow, cool. It's kind of funny, like all the stuff I didn't factor into that decision as much as that was the incident that stuck out to him because I solved a bleeding neck problem, right? It's one thing to write good code and to participate and to be present in the team and generally do a good job and write good code. It's another thing to like solve a problem that's going to make somebody else look good as a result of something you've done. I have a lot of ideas and opinions about how and why people should get promoted and how you can do so, and ways I've seen it, ways I've been promoted at this company and the last one, ways I've promoted people as an engineering manager and what I look out for. But also I know that in reality, we are humans. And there is no tried and true approach to doing anything out there because we're all a bit unpredictable. But I will tell you this, debugging is in general one of the best skills you can ever have because knowing how to investigate bugs takes you out of working in your tiny little piece of the code base and exposes you to other people's work. So when you get that first job, or if you're on that first job, I encourage you to volunteer for on-call rotations. On-call rotations are when you are the person that is on call. Basically, you are the person that they're going to call up on the phone or hit up on Slack or however they're going to get in touch with you to let you know that, hey, there's a critical issue. We need you to fix it. Having these debugging skills is paramount because understanding how to look in and figure out, debug these issues, find a fix for them, or at least present some sort of like investigation that says, I think it's around here and here's why. That's going to lead you to all sorts of interesting rabbit holes. It's going to get the respect of your peers. It's also going to make you appear perhaps more senior than you are. For example, if you're a really junior person on a team and maybe you're not the best at writing code, but maybe you're really good at solving these critical issues, and let's say your company has a lot of critical issues, which is often the case, and you're the person solving them, you're the same person they're going to be like, we want to keep this person. We want to keep Charlie or Sarah or whatever. We want to keep this human being here because they're the ones that are stopping us from having awful bugs slip through the cracks. And in my case, the bug I did was so high profile that it ended up actually being part of my case for getting promoted to senior software engineer at the time, among other things. You can't just be a terrible engineer and solve a bug once every 6 months, or can you? I don't know. Maybe you should try that out. Try it out. Let me know how it goes for you. Maybe here's a crazy one. Make your own bug. Here's a really, should I even say this? But yeah, try this one out. Maybe you make a bug, you put it in production, blows up something spectacular, then you rush in to save the day. Please don't actually do that. That'd be an awful idea. I bet you somebody's out there done that, though. Don't do that, though. You have some morals. Be a good human being. Be a good developer. Anyway, I hope you use the REST method. I hope you use debugger statements. I hope you learn how to reproduce code locally on your machine. And if you want practice with debugging stuff, I think the best way you can do that is try to pull down an open source library, go out and find one, look at the issues on GitHub for that open source library, try to reproduce that issue locally, and see if you can figure it out. And even if you can't figure it out, just learning how to reproduce the issue is going to be a really interesting challenge for you to do, because reading through somebody else's code is a lot different from reading your own. And it's going to expose you to different ways of writing code, different ways of understanding how to debug code that's not yours, and force you to really understand some concepts that you might not just come across in your own code. So that's a really great way to actually put yourself in a position of like, well, what is it like to be a developer that has to fix a bug in some massive code base? You can go out there and find them. There's all sorts of bugs everywhere for you to solve that developers would love for you to solve. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Check out Parsity.io when you get a chance if you want to learn unit testing, how to become a full stack software developer, all that good stuff, and I'll see you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.